I never thought a day would come when I would feel like a guest in my own son's house. Not angry, not unwanted, loudly, just quietly unnecessary. The day my daughter-in-law asked me to leave, I did not cry. I smiled instead. I still remember how the light came through the window that morning, soft, almost kind, as if the day itself did not know what was about to happen. She stood near the door. Her hands were calm. Her voice was low. "Amy," she said gently, "it would be better if you stay somewhere else for some time." Some time. Those two words stayed with me. I looked at her face. She was not cruel. She was not angry. She was just sure. My son stood behind her, quiet, looking at the floor. I waited for him to say something, anything. But silence answered me instead. So I nodded. I said, "Okay." When you are a mother, you learn early how to hide pain. Learn how to swallow words. You learn how to smile even when your heart is shaking. That morning I went back to my room. I sat on the edge of the bed. I placed my hands on my knees. And I breathed. Because crying would not change anything. I raised my son alone. His father died when my boy was only 6 years old. I was still young then, too young to understand how long life could be. The day my husband passed away, the house became very quiet. No footsteps, no laughter, only the sound of my son breathing in his sleep. That night, I sat beside him and watched his chest rise and fall. I told myself, this child is my life now. From that day, everything I did was for him. I woke up before sunrise. I cooked simple food. I washed clothes by hand. I worked small jobs when I could. Some days I was very tired, but when my son smiled, my tiredness disappeared. He used to hold my hand when we walked outside. His fingers were small and warm. "Amy," he would say, "don't let go." I never did. Our house was small. 2 rooms. An old kitchen, a window that looked at the street. But it was full of life. In the evenings, I helped him with homework. Sometimes he got angry. Sometimes he laughed. At night, we ate together. Even if it was just bread and tea. I always made sure he ate first. When he slept, I prayed. I prayed quietly. I did not ask God for riches. I did not ask for comfort. I only asked for my son's safety. "Please give him a better life than mine," I whispered many nights. I never imagined that one day, that better life would no longer include me. As he grew older, things changed slowly. He became taller, quieter, busy. He spent more time outside, with friends, with dreams. I understood. This is how life goes. Still, when he came home late, I waited, not to ask questions, just to see his face. Sometimes he noticed. Sometimes he did not. I told myself, he is growing. When he got his first job, I cried that night. Not from sadness, from pride. I thought, all those years were worth it. Then one evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table. The light was dim. The fan was making noise. He cleared his throat and said, "Amy, I want to get married." I looked at him. I smiled. "That's good," I said. "You should." My voice sounded steady, but inside, my heart moved. I had known this day would come. Still, knowing does not make it easier. He told me about her work, her family. I listened carefully. That night, after he went to sleep, I stayed awake. The house felt different already. I was happy for him. I truly was. But I also felt afraid. Not of her. Not of marriage. I was afraid of becoming invisible. The wedding happened quickly. Relatives came. The house filled with voices, laughter, music. I stayed busy, cooking, serving, smiling. People said, "You raised him well." I nodded. My heart felt full. When my son sat beside his wife, he looked proud, happy. I told myself again, this is how life should be. After marriage, the house changed its rhythm. Not suddenly, slowly. The kitchen was no longer only mine. The cupboards changed. The routines changed. My daughter-in-law was polite. She greeted me. She spoke softly. But there was distance. I tried to help. I really did. Sometimes she said, Me, I'll do it." So I stepped back. Sometimes she did not say anything. So I stayed quiet. I did not want to interfere. I did not want to cause problems. I told myself, this is their time. My son became busier. Work, responsibilities. He still spoke to me, but not like before. He no longer sat with me at night. He no longer asked how my day was. At dinner, they talked to each other, about plans, about future. I listened. I smiled. Sometimes, I felt like a shadow. I stopped giving advice. I stopped sharing stories. I learned to stay silent. Because silence feels safer when you are afraid of being unwanted. There were small moments that hurt. Very small, but sharp. If I cooked, they ordered food outside. If I waited for my son, he came home late. If I felt unwell, I rested alone. I never said anything. Because mothers are taught that love means endurance. But inside, something was breaking. Slowly, quietly. The house that once felt warm began to feel cold. Not because of words, but because of absence. Absence of attention, absence of need. I told myself again and again, this is normal. But my heart knew something else. It knew I was being left behind. And then came the morning that changed everything. The light through the window, the calm voice, the quiet sun, the words, stay somewhere else. That moment did not explode. Pause for a moment. Deep pause. After that morning, nothing was said openly. No arguments, no raised voices. Life continued the same way on the outside. But inside me, something had shifted. I stayed in the house for a few more days after that conversation. Those days felt very long. Every sound felt louder. Every silence felt heavier. I moved carefully, like someone walking on thin glass. I woke up early, as I always did, out of habit. Not because anyone needed me to. The kitchen smelled familiar. Oil, tea leaves, old memories. I stood there, holding a cup of tea, watching the steam rise. And I suddenly realized something painful. No one was waiting for me anymore. Before, my son would come to the kitchen and say, is tea ready? Now he drank tea in his room, or outside, or not at all. Small changes, very small, but they add up. My daughter-in-law was not cruel. I want to say that clearly. She never shouted. She never insulted me. But she had a way of making me feel like I was in the way. If I cleaned the living room, she rearranged it later. If I folded laundry, she refolded it. Not angrily, just quietly. I stopped doing things one by one. I told myself, let her manage her home. But sometimes, I stood near the doorway of the kitchen, not knowing whether to step in or step back. That feeling of not knowing your place. It is very heavy. One evening, I tried to talk to my son. We were alone for a moment. He was tying his shoes. I said softly, "Are you okay, Beta?" He nodded. "Yes, Emmy. Just busy." I wanted to say more. I wanted to ask, did I do something wrong? Do you still need me? Am I becoming a problem? But the words stayed inside. Because when someone is busy, your pain feels unimportant. So I smiled. I stepped back, and he left. At night, I lay awake in my room. The walls felt closer than before. The ceiling fan made a slow sound. I stared at the ceiling and remembered other nights. Nights when my son was small, when he had fever, when I sat beside him, cooling his forehead with a wet cloth. Back then, he needed me. Now, he did not. That is the hardest truth a mother learns. Days passed. I began spending more time in my room. Not because anyone told me to, but because I felt safest there. I kept my things neat, my clothes folded, my bed simple. Sometimes I held old photographs, black and white ones. Son as a child, My husband. I talk to those pictures sometimes. Not loudly, just inside my heart. One afternoon, it rained. The sound of rain always made me emotional. I stood near the window, watching drops slide down the glass. My daughter-in-law was on the phone in the living room, laughing. My son came home early that day. He went straight to their room. No one noticed me standing there. I felt like part of the furniture. That night, dinner was quiet. They talked about moving furniture, about repainting a room. I listened. Then my daughter-in-law said, "If Amy stays somewhere else, we could use that room differently." She said it like an idea, not like a decision. My son did not respond. I kept eating. My hands shook slightly, but no one saw. That sentence stayed with me. Use that room differently. That room had once been my safe place, my prayer corner. I had given everything, without keeping score. Not a dramatic one. Acceptance. I would not fight this. I would not argue. I would not beg to stay. Because love that has to be defended loses its softness. And I did not want to become bitter. I started sorting my belongings slowly, one drawer at a time. Old clothes, old letters, receipts, memories. I threw away things I no longer needed. With each item, it felt like I was letting go of a piece of myself. But I kept the important things. Photographs, a small notebook where I wrote prayers, a shawl my son gave me years ago. One afternoon, my son noticed. He saw me folding clothes. "Amy, what are you doing?" he asked. I looked at him. "Just organizing," I said. He nodded and walked away. That hurt more than any argument could have. The house felt different now, not because of walls or furniture, but because I was already leaving. Inside my heart, parentheses, spoke less, moved less. I did not want to leave behind tension. ... A few days later, my daughter-in-law came to my room. She stood at the door. "Ami," she said softly, "have you thought about what we discussed?" I looked at her. "Yes," I replied. She waited. "I will leave," I said calmly. Her shoulders relaxed slightly. "Thank you for understanding," she said. I nodded. Understanding. That word felt heavy. That evening, I packed my bag. Not everything, just enough. I sat on the bed afterward. The room looked empty already. I ran my hand over the blanket, the wall, the door handle. So many years, so many memories, reduced to one bag. My son came in later. He sat beside me. "Ami," he said quietly, "this is just temporary." I smiled at him. "Yes," I said. But we both knew temporary things sometimes become permanent. He hugged me. I hugged him back. But the hug felt different. Careful. That night, I barely slept. I listened to the sounds of the house, the ticking clock, the distant traffic. I wondered when this house stopped being mine. And I realized something painful. It didn't happen suddenly. It happened slowly, one silence at a time. The morning I left the house felt very slow. Time moved carefully, as if it did not want to disturb anything. I woke up before everyone else, not because I had to, but because sleep would not come back to me. I sat on the bed for a long time. My bag was packed and resting near the door. I looked around the room one last time. The walls were plain, but they had heard my prayers, my tears, my whispers. I folded the blanket neatly. Not because anyone would notice, but because this is how I leave places. With care. I opened the window slightly. Fresh morning air came in. I closed my eyes and breathed. This room had been my world, and now it was just a room again. I walked into the kitchen quietly. The light was soft. The floor felt cold under my feet. I made tea for myself. 1 cup. Not 2. I sat at the table alone. I remembered how many times I had sat here. Across from my son. watching him eat, listening to his stories. Now, the chair across from me was empty. I drank my tea slowly. Every sip felt like a goodbye. My daughter-in-law came into the kitchen later. She looked surprised to see me. "Oh, you're awake early," she said. "Yes," I replied. She hesitated for a moment. "I hope you don't mind," she said. "I told the driver to come later." Driver, so it was already arranged. "I don't mind," I said softly. She nodded. That was all. My son came out of his room. He looked tired. Maybe he had not slept well either. "Ami," he said, "you didn't have to wake up so early." "I wanted to," I said. He stood there, unsure what to say. Silence filled the space between us. I wanted to say so many things. I wanted to remind him of the nights I stayed awake, of the times I skipped meals, of the prayers whispered just for him. But love does not keep records. So I stayed quiet. When it was time to leave, I picked up my bag. It felt heavier than it should. Not because of clothes, but because of memories. I stood at the door. I looked around the house. The sofa, the pictures on the wall, the clock. Everything looked the same, but I was not part of it anymore. My daughter-in-law stood aside. My son stood near the door. "Take care, Ami," he said. "I will," I replied. I stepped outside. The door closed behind me. Not loudly, just softly. But something inside me closed with it. A drive to my new place was quiet. I watched the city move past the window. People walking, shops opening, life going on. Cow wondered how many people were carrying silent pain like mine. When we reached, the driver helped with my space order. The building was old, simple. This was my new home. One bed, one table, one window. It smelled empty. I sat on the bed. For a moment, I felt lost. But then I told myself, this is okay. Sometimes, we must learn how to live again. The first few days were very hard. The silence was loud. I woke up and forgot where I was. I reached for sounds that were not there. No footsteps, no voices, just quiet. I cooked simple food. I ate alone. I washed my clothes by hand. I kept myself busy. Because when you stop, memories rush in. At night, I missed my son the most. Not the grown man. The little boy. The one who used to sleep with his hand on mine. I remembered his voice when he called me Ami. Soft, needing. Now, his voice was polite, adult. I cried some nights, very quietly, not because I was angry, but because I felt forgotten. Days turned into weeks. My son visited once. He brought fruit. "How are you?" he asked. "I'm fine," I said. He looked around the room. "It's small," he said. I smiled. We talked about small things. Weather, work, not about feelings. He stayed for a short time. When he left, the room felt emptier. I did not blame my daughter-in-law. I want to say that again. She was building her life, and I was part of the past. That does not make her bad. It just made me unnecessary. I started going for walks, slow ones. I watched the sky change colors. I sat in the park sometimes. I listened to children laugh. Their laughter made me smile and ache at the same time. One afternoon, I found an old letter in my bag. It was from my son. He had written it years ago. "Ami, thank you for everything." I held that paper for a long time. I realized something important. He had loved me. He still did. But love changes shape. Years into that moment, I cooked my favorite food. Just for myself. I ate slowly. I felt proud. Because I was still standing. Still breathing. Still living. At night, I prayed. Not for my son. Not for myself. But for peace. The kind that comes from acceptance. Stands for peace. I began to understand something. Being needed is not the same as being loved. And being loved does not always mean being close. This thought hurt, but it also healed. Time teaches lessons slowly. Not in one loud moment, but in many quiet days. After a few weeks in my new place, I began to feel something unexpected. Relief. Life became simple again, and simplicity brought calm. One morning, I made tea and sat by the window. The sky was clear. Birds moved freely. I watched them and thought, they do not ask where they belong. They just live. That thought stayed with me. My son called one afternoon. His voice sounded unsure. "Ami," he said, "are you doing okay?" "Yes," I replied. A pause. "You don't call much," he said. I smiled. "I don't want to disturb you," I said gently. Another pause. "I miss you," he said quietly. Those words reached me slowly. "I miss you too," I replied. But something had changed. Missing someone does not always mean needing them close. He visited again a few days later. He brought sweets this time. We sat together. He talked more than before. About work, about stress. I listened, like I always had. At one point, he said, "Things are different now." "Yes," I said. He looked at me. "I hope you're not hurt," he said. I looked at his face. The little boy was still there, just buried under adulthood. "I was hurt," I said honestly. "But I am healing." He nodded. We did not say more, but understanding sat between us. I realized something that day. My son did not forget me. He just did not know how to hold both worlds. And he chose the one closest to him. After he left, I felt tired, but also lighter, because speaking truth, even softly, frees the heart. Morning walks, simple meals, afternoon rest, and that gave me peace. One evening, my daughter-in-law called. Her voice was polite. "Emmy," she said. "I hope you are well." "I am," I replied. She hesitated. "We did not mean to hurt you," she said. "I know," I said. Another pause. "Thank you for understanding," she said. I smiled. Understanding had cost me a lot, but it had also saved me. That night, I thought about forgiveness. Not the loud kind, not the spoken kind, but the quiet one. The one that lives in acceptance. I forgave them, not because they asked, but because I wanted peace. I began helping others. Small things. Listening, sharing food, offering comfort. Helping reminded me that I still had purpose. Sometimes loneliness returned, especially at night, but it no longer frightened me. It sat beside me like an old companion. I learned something important. Being alone is not the same as being abandoned. Sometimes being alone is a choice life makes for you, so you can hear yourself again. One afternoon, I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw lines on my face, gray hair, tired eyes, but I also saw strength. I had survived loss before. I could survive this too. My son began calling more often. Short calls, simple words. "How are you? Did you eat?" I answered kindly, without expectations. That made our connection lighter. I no longer wanted to return to the old house. Not because of pain, but because that chapter was complete. I had loved deeply there. Now I needed to live lightly. I wrote a letter one day, not to send, just to release. I wrote about my love, my hurt, my pride. Then I folded it and kept it away. Some words do not need witnesses. That night, I slept peacefully, for the first time in a long while. Healing does not arrive suddenly. It comes in small moments, moments you do not notice at first. One morning, I woke up and realized I had slept through the night without thinking of the past. That surprised me. I lay there for a while, listening to the sounds outside my window. A bicycle passing, someone laughing, life happening. And for the first time, I did not feel left behind. I made breakfast slowly, just bread and tea. I sat at the table and ate without rushing. No one was waiting. No one needed me. and that felt peaceful. Later that day, I cleaned the room. Not because it was dirty, but because cleaning clears the mind. As I wiped the table, I thought about all the years I spent caring for others. I never regretted those years, but I realized something gently. I had forgotten myself. I began doing small things for me. I bought a new shawl. Nothing expensive, just soft. I cooked foods I liked, even if no one else was there to eat. I rested when I felt tired, without guilt. At first, it felt strange, almost selfish. But slowly, it felt right. My son visited again one afternoon. He looked different, less rushed, more present. He sat across from me. "Emmy," he said, "you look better." I smiled. "I feel better," I replied. He looked relieved. We talked quietly. He asked about my routine, my days. He listened, really listened. That mattered. At one point, he said, "I didn't realize how lonely you felt." I did not correct him, because loneliness had taught me something. I said softly, "I didn't realize either." He stayed longer that day. Before leaving, he hesitated. "You know," he said, "you can come visit anytime." I nodded. I said, "Now." I knew I did not need to return to feel loved. After he left, I sat alone again, but it felt different now. The room did not feel empty. It felt mine. Days passed gently. I met other women nearby. We shared tea, stories, different lives, similar wounds. Listening to them reminded me that my pain was not unique, and that made it lighter. One evening, I received a message. It was from my daughter-in-law. She said, "I hope you are well. Thank you for giving us space." I read it twice. Then I replied, "I am well. I wish you peace." No bitterness, no blame, just truth. That night, I thought deeply about mothers, about children, about how love changes shape as time moves. A mother gives everything at the start, but later, she must learn how to step aside, not because she is unwanted, but because her child must walk freely. I remembered my own mother, how she let me go, how she never complained. I finally understood her silence. Some evenings, I still missed my son deeply, especially the child he once was. But I stopped wishing time would turn back, because holding on to the past steals peace from the present. I began writing again. Not stories, just thoughts. Simple lines. They helped me release emotions I did not want to carry anymore. One day, while writing, I realized something important. My worth was never dependent on being needed. I was worthy because I loved, because I endured, because I lived with honesty. That realization changed me. I stood taller. I smiled more. I breathed deeper. My son called one night. He said, "Emmy, I'm proud of you." I closed my eyes. That meant more than I expected. "Thank you," I replied. After the call, I sat quietly. I felt complete, not because everything was perfect, but because I had accepted reality. Closure is not a goodbye. It is a soft understanding. And that understanding had finally reached me. As time moved forward, I learned to live without looking back too often. Not because the past no longer mattered, but because it no longer hurt the same way. I still thought about my son every day. That never changed. A mother's heart does not forget. But the thoughts became softer, gentler, like old photographs that no longer bring tears, only quiet warmth. I sat by the window with my tea and watched the world wake up. People hurried to work. Children walked to school. Life moved in its own rhythm. I was no longer rushing to keep up. I had found my pace. I realized something very important. When my son married, he did not stop loving me. He just started loving differently. And I had mistaken distance for rejection. Understanding that brought peace. One afternoon, my son came with his wife. It was the first time they came together. She greeted me respectfully. We sat and shared tea. The conversation was simple. No tension, no past wounds spoken. Just the present moment. That was enough. Before leaving, she said quietly, "Ami, thank you for everything you did for him." I nodded. My heart felt calm. Not because I needed her approval, but because I felt seen. After they left, I did not cry. I smiled. Because I knew we had all grown. I began sharing my story with others. Not to complain, but to help. Many mothers listened quietly. Some cried. And in helping them, I healed more. I learned that motherhood has stages. At first, you are needed. Then you are depended on. And finally, you are remembered. Each stage has its own pain and its own beauty. I stopped asking life, "Why did this happen?" Instead, I asked, "What did this teach me?" And the answer was clear. It taught me strength. It taught me patience. It taught me self-respect. I learned that love does not always stay close. Sometimes it steps back so others can grow. And that stepping back is not weakness. It is wisdom. If my son listens to this one day, I want him to know something. I never regretted loving him. Not for one moment. Even when it hurt. Because love given freely never becomes a loss. To every mother listening, I want to say this. If your child has grown distant, do not think you failed. You succeeded. You raised someone strong enough to build their own life. And that was always the goal. You are not forgotten. Your love lives on in the values you pass down. Even if you sit alone sometimes, I still light a small lamp in the evenings, not for anyone else, just for myself. It reminds me that I am still here, still worthy. Life did not end when my son's world changed. It simply became quieter. And in that quiet, I found myself again. I no longer wait at doors. I no longer listen for footsteps. I listen to my own breath. And that is enough. If there is one lesson I leave behind with this story, it is this. Love deeply. Give fully. But when the time comes, learn to let go gently. Because peace comes, not from holding tighter, but from trusting that love remains, even when distance grows. This is not a sad ending. It is a soft one, a warm one, a real one. And as I sit here now, with tea in my hands and calm in my heart, I know this. I loved, I lived, and that will always be enough.